afternoon. Today is April 11th. It is 2 p.m. It is the fifth broadcast of the Sophisticated Shut-In, and it is also day 19 of the shelter-in-place order here in Austin, Texas. I'm Ivan Vukpavlovich, and today's topic is one of the more misunderstood terms in the world of menswear, and that is cocktail attire. Now, because of its name, cocktail, many assume that it is a loud, very colorful, bright kind of attire set. And that is not the case. It is the evening equivalent of business dress code for men. And as such, it falls right smack in the middle of the menswear formality spectrum. Right above it, for evening wear, is the tuxedo, or as our European friends refer to it, the dinner jacket, with arguably its daytime equivalent of the stroller suit. And then finally, the most formal is the morning dress for day wear and white tie, sometimes referred to as tails, for evening wear. Below business and cocktail attire is what we call business casual. And then finally, at the very bottom, the entry point, sportswear and streetwear. So right there in the middle. So what does it look like, and when do we wear it? First of all, it is an evening ensemble set to be worn during evening events. A relatively wide range of events for which it's appropriate. Starting at the top of the formality scale for cocktail attire is if you get an invitation to an event. It might be a wedding, it might be a charity ball or gala, something like that. The dress code might say black tie optional. Now, if it simply says black tie, that doesn't mean you wear a suit with a black tie. That specifically refers to a dinner jacket or tuxedo. That is specifically what black tie entails. But more and more often, for events where the host doesn't want to impose a tuxedo on the men, especially if some people would have to rent one or something like that, the dress code becomes black tie optional. That does not mean that if you don't have a tuxedo that you can wear just about anything else. You wear the next formality down, which is what we're going to talk about today, cocktail attire. Some events may actually specify cocktail attire. For example, evening business meetings, going out to dinner with clients, or when evening social mixers that are based around the workplace, things like that. And then also just evening events for their own sake. Maybe it's a cocktail party where people want to be dressed up. Maybe it's a birthday get-together at a country club, things like that. But those types of invitations may specify cocktail attire as opposed to black tie option. So, what is it? Well, there's a bit of a range depending on whether it's black tie optional, cocktail attire, and whether that cocktail attire is for business purposes or strictly social. But they all have a few things in common. Because it is an evening event, I tend to stick with black leather for my footwear. And I tend to stick with white shirts, solid white shirts. But that is up to the wearer in specific situations. Let's start with black tie optional events. Maybe it's a wedding, maybe it's a gala. Because many men will be in black tie, in a tuxedo, what you want to do is stick with a monochromatic look, something like I'm wearing today. I like to go with a charcoal suit, although navy, like the one hanging up here, is also acceptable. I like to go with charcoal simply because it is on that black to white range, and it'll blend a little bit more nicely with tuxedos, which are generally black. We're seeing more and more midnight blue tuxedos, which is nice, but black is still the order of the day. I like to go with a gray or silver tie. I don't like to do a black tie because a black long tie to me says funeral, although there are people who disagree, and there are people who wear a black tie with cocktail attire and look great. A crisp white shirt. Now, especially at black tie optional events, I like to go with a shirt that takes cufflinks as opposed to barrel cuffs. Simply because all the men in the tuxedos will be in a cuff-linked shirt. I like to kind of be right there along with them. What kind of shoes are acceptable? I'm wearing my plain toe Oxfords, which are probably the most formal shoes I have. But cap toe Oxfords are just as good. And even though I don't like to wear derbies with a suit, one can. It can look great, but you'll notice they're all black and they're all very simple designs. I generally avoid broguing on shoes in general, but especially for evening looks. And then as far as going a little bit further with the shirts, I actually prefer a single layer cuff-length shirt. Meaning, unlike a French cuff, which folds over and becomes double layered at the cuff, this is a custom shirt that I made that has only a single layer. To me, it looks cleaner. It does mix formalities a little bit because that is typically the kind of shirt cuff one would wear with a white tie ensemble, which would have a wing collar. It's a concession I made simply because I think it's a small detail. I don't think anyone would fault me for it. And with this shirt, I also specified the first 4 button positions to be on a button strip, so I can remove the buttons entirely and put in shirt studs should I ever need to wear a tuxedo. You can wear a barrel cuff with cocktail attire. In fact, I have one that I like to do in the winter, which I don't know if you'll be able to see this. This one needs to be pressed. I apologize. But I had it made with a square cuff so that it kind of still lines up to my shirt, or to my jacket in that nice double square fashion. That particular shirt is a herringbone, so it's appropriate for winter. But all of these shirts are, of course, appropriate for regular daytime business wear as well. At black tie optional events, as I said, I like to stay monochromatic. So this is a woven silk silver grenadine tie. It is my favorite tie in the universe, and to prove it to you, here's my other identical tie that I have as backup. This one isn't woven. This is just a straight silk silver tie that I love. Here's a wool mid-gray tie that would work really well. I like gray, in case you haven't noticed. Yet a different shade of and different weave of grenadine. A darker shade of grenadine, etc. All of these are perfectly suitable for black tie optional events. With a nice crisp white linen pocket square, you're going to be good to go. One thing that I like to nod at black tie optional events is an old rule for black tie dress, which is one doesn't wear a watch. Why? Because you're at a festive event, a wedding, a gala. Wearing a watch suggests that you need to check the time because you have somewhere better to be, and it is considered an insult to the host. So if I'm at a black tie optional event, I won't do a watch. If I am wearing a watch, let's say at a business dinner, which is incredibly rare, or indeed just a fun party, I won't wear my daytime Omega business style watch or anything like it. I could, it's perfectly appropriate, but I find it a little bit too large for evening wear. So even though it's not even 1/20th of the watch that the Omega is, this Timex Marlin has a much, much smaller face, and to me, in these kinds of ensembles, it just reads as a little more understated and a little more elegant. Yeah. So, should you have to go to a very somber event, say a funeral or a wake, cocktail attire with a black, either solid or very, very subtly patterned tie works really well. Again, you can actually wear these to black tie optional events as well. Now, can you wear a bow tie with cocktail attire? Absolutely. Here things get a little bit more finicky, only because you want to stay away from solid black or indeed any solid color silk or grosgrain bow tie that has no pattern to it whatsoever. Why? It might look like you are trying to pass a regular suit off as a tuxedo. So in this case, I don't have a lot of bow ties, but in this case, you'll want to have something that has a nice, probably dark patterned kind of look. Now, all of this is perfectly appropriate for all of those black tie optional events. What's next? Business evening events. Maybe you're just going out to a group dinner, maybe you're taking clients out, maybe there's a meet and greet between two companies which are either merging or about to do business together, etc. The specification for this is more or less identical to the Power Business daytime uniform. Dark charcoal suit, you know, either a burgundy or dark purple or navy tie, still a crisp white pocket square. You know, it's that look that says, I'm not leaving until the deal is done. That translates perfectly to cocktail attire for business events. This is where you're going to start seeing, you know, here's my wine or burgundy grenadine tie. Perfect for that. Here's another burgundy, slightly lighter, a little shinier, but you'll notice still a very, very subtle pattern. This purple nice, classic, small pattern. You'll notice that any pattern that I'm showing you is small. No huge florals or, loud paisleys, nothing like that. Navy grenadine, can't go wrong with it. Okay. All of those are perfectly suitable business looks. Now the difference between a daytime business, and I'm not talking about like the power business, big meeting, uniform, but just your regular day-to-day business suit look and evening is, whereas it is perfectly appropriate to wear a nice patterned shirt with, maybe a louder tie during the day, maybe a check pattern or a stripe or something like that. Generally speaking, we stick with crisp white shirts for cocktail attire for business purposes. Also, generally speaking, you want to stay, as I mentioned, plainer ties and likely still just a crisp white pocket square. Whereas during the day, you're more likely to do some kind of colored or patterned pocket square. This kind of stuff, whatnot. And then finally, cocktail attire for truly festive events. Maybe it's a wedding that specifies cocktail attire as opposed to black tie optional. Maybe it is, a birthday party, or maybe it's just a cocktail party. Here we can start branching out a little bit. For weddings, nice blush pink tie with corresponding pocket square can be nice. Now be careful. You still want to be very careful when incorporating anything bright, because you don't want to look like you're trying to outshine the host. If you're the host, go for it. If it's your wedding, do whatever you want. If it's your birthday, fantastic. But for the most part, you want to make sure that the host of the party is at the center of attention. So that's where, your navy ties, your olive kind of stuff, your dark olive is going to come into play. So the operative concept here: dark suit, white shirt, simple tie, black shoes, and you can't go wrong. Beyond that, if you start messing with that formula, make sure that it is at a festive event, not a business event, not a white tie or black tie optional event, and you'll be good to go. That, I think, more or less covers it. Next time, which will be this coming Thursday, forgive me, I don't know what the date is, we will discuss mixing sportswear with tailored wear, and we'll also discuss a little bit about care for tailored clothing. Until then, thank you very, very much for joining me. Until next time.